Hey everyone, Leander here, and today we're going to learn how to make some simple animation using JavaScript. This tutorial requires some basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and a little JavaScript. If you need that, you can check out my previous tutorials on those topics. In the last tutorial, which introduced JavaScript, we learned how to change the position of an image. Today we're going to learn how to move an image smoothly across the screen. Let's begin though by erasing our previous code and images so that we can have a fresh start. The only thing we'll leave here is our index.html file. And let's delete everything from the body of our page except the style and script tags. Also, let's change the title of our page to JS Animation. So now, we have a nice blank page. There are a couple new things we have to learn before we can get started with our animation. To learn those things, we're going to start by making two applications, a stopwatch and a fortune teller. We'll start with the fortune teller. So in our HTML, let's add a heading, and we'll have it say fortune teller. So the way the fortune teller is going to work is it's going to have the user ask a yes or no question, push a button, and then the answer to that question will appear, yes or no. So let's create some instructions for the user, and we'll say think of a yes or no question, and click tell fortune to get the answer. Next, let's create our Tell Fortune button. And let's use CSS to make the font size bigger for our body and buttons. And of course, we need a place for our answer to appear. So here's how we'll do that. Answer. We'll add a span, and we'll give this span the ID answer. And that's where our answer is going to appear. When users click the Tell Fortune button, it's going to call the Tell Fortune function. And now let's get started defining that function down between our script tags. Now the way our Tell Fortune function is going to work is it's just going to randomly give a yes or a no. To do that with JavaScript, we need to first generate a random number. Here's how we do that. We first create a variable, and we'll call it random number, and we set that equal to math.random. And make sure you capitalize the M on math. Let's see what this gives us by console logging our random number. That's strange, nothing's happening. And we're not getting any errors either. Maybe I need to check my spelling. So, Tell Fortune down here looks okay. Same spelling here. Uh-oh. Instead of on click, we have on lick. We better change that. Okay, now it's working. Notice that these numbers always seem to be between 0 and 1. In fact, they can go as low as 0 and as high as 1. So if you click long enough, you might get a 1 or a 0. So how can we use such numbers to generate a yes or no answer with our fortune teller? Well, first, we need to create another variable, and we'll call it answer, and we'll set it equal to empty quotations. Next, we're going to write some code that will check if our random number is higher than 0.5. If it is, we're going to make the answer yes. If random number greater than 0.5, curly brackets, answer equals yes. This is called a conditional statement because it's checking to see if this condition is true. Is random number greater than 0.5? And if it is, it does something. Let's output the answer to our answer span to see if it works. So document get element by ID answer dot inner HTML equals answer. Okay, the random number was less than or equal to 0.5, so no answer yet. Oh, it's greater than 0.5, 0.96, blah blah blah. So we get a yes. It's working. Now let's work on generating the no answer. If we wanted to, we could use another if statement for that, but we don't have to. All we have to do is add this to our current if statement. Else, curly brackets, and then answer equals no. Let's see if this works. All right. So we're getting yes and no answers. Fantastic. Technically, though, we should make our condition here greater than or equal to 0.5 in order to make the probability of yes coming up equal to the probability of no coming up. So this is how you do that. You simply add an equal sign after the greater than sign. And it's the same for less than. If I wanted to do less than, I just do a less than sign and then equal to. We could stop here if we wanted to, but I'd like to show you another cleaner way we could write this function. And that is by using math.round. Let me show you. We'll take our random number and we'll set it equal to math.round random number. Let's see what that gives us. 1, 1, 0, 1. So as you can see, math.round rounds our random number to the nearest integer, either 0 or 1. Math.round changes all the random numbers that are greater than or equal to 0.5 to 1. So we can actually change this part of our conditional statement. We can simplify it and just check to see if random number is equal to 1. But how do we do that? Let's try random number equals 1 for our condition. Uh-oh. We've got a 0, but our fortune teller is telling us yes. And the same thing for 1. So everything becomes yes now. What's going on? Well, maybe we can get a hint by console logging our random number after we're finished with our conditional statement. So we'll just console log our random number again, and we'll add in before here and after down here. And let's see what this gives us. Okay, before 1, after 1. Whoa, look at this. Before 0, after 1. Again, before 0, after 1. So, it looks like what's happening is we are actually changing random number into 1 here in this condition. And that makes sense because until now we've used the equal sign to set a variable equal to something. Answer equals yes. And so that's exactly what it's doing here. So if we want to just check if random number is equal to 1, we need to add something to this condition. We need to add another equal sign. So random number equals 1. And what this will do is it will just check to see if random number is equal to 1. It won't set random number equal to 1. So let's try that. Okay, now it's working normally. Before 0, after 0. Now we can get rid of this second console log here, and I'll also take off this before part. We could be finished with our fortune teller now, but what if we wanted to add a third possible answer? What if we wanted, for example, maybe as a possible answer? So we could have yes, no, or maybe. How would we do that? Well, right now, our math.random method gives us a number that goes from 0 to 1. When we round it, we get either a 0 or a 1. The integer 1 gives us the answer yes, whereas the integer 0 gives us the answer no. If we wanted one further possibility, we'd need one more integer, which means we'd need to somehow get a 2 sometimes. So let's think about this. How could we change our random number so that instead of going from 0 to 1, it goes from 0 to 2? Well, all we have to do is simply multiply our random number by 2. Here's how we do that. Our multiplication operator in JavaScript is the asterisk. So we'll add an asterisk and 2. And now we're multiplying math.random by 2. So what this is going to do is the lowest number we could get will still be 0, right? 0 times 2 is 0. But the highest number we can get now will be 2, because the highest random number we can generate with this is 1. And 1 times 2 is 2. Let's try this out. Okay, so we got a 2. Another 2. And of course, it's telling us no when we're getting a 2, because 2 is not equal to 1. So let's modify our conditional statement a little bit. Let's have the answer be yes when the random number is equal to 2. And when it's equal to 1, let's have it make the answer maybe. To do that, we could use another if statement, but I'd like to show you another approach, and that is to use else if, like this. We just tack it on below the if statement. We say else if, and then the next condition in curly brackets, and we'll say random number equals 1. And so if the random number is not equal to 2, it'll go on to this statement here, and it'll check if random number is equal to 1. If it is equal to 1, we'll have it make the answer maybe. And then finally, if it's not equal to 2 and not equal to 1, meaning it's equal to 0, the answer will be no. Let's give this a try. No, 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 maybe, maybe, no, maybe, yes, okay, our fortune teller is working. So let's try asking our fortune teller a question. Will my viewers become great programmers? Maybe. Fair enough. Okay, I think we are done with this application. So let's move on and create our stopwatch. So we'll go up in our HTML and we'll add a horizontal rule and another heading, and we'll have it say stopwatch. And then we need a button to start our stopwatch, and we'll have it say start, and a div for the time to appear in. We'll give it that ID time. And since our stopwatch is going to start with 0 every time, I'll just put the 0 in, like that. Let's see what that looks like. Let's make the font size for our time a bit bigger. That's better. And the function we're going to call when the user hits the start button is going to be called count up. Next, we'll go down into our JavaScript and we'll start our definition for the function. Var count up equals function, parentheses, curly brackets. And above that function, we're going to create a variable, a global variable called time, and we'll set that equal to 0. This time variable is basically going to be the number of seconds that have passed since the user clicked the start button. And so one of the things that our countup function is going to do is every second it's going to add 1 to our time. Like this. Time equals time plus 1. And of course we have to output our updated time to our time div like this. So far, this is what we have. Basically, it's a counting machine. We click the button, and it counts up by 1. To make this into a stopwatch, we have to somehow make the browser wait a little bit, and then call the countup function for us. And then wait a little bit more, and do it again. To do that, we need to use a new method called setTimeout. Here's how that works. We type setTimeout with a capital T, beginning timeout, parentheses, and in these parentheses we put two things. The first thing we put is the name of the function we want the browser to call, and then we put how long we want the browser to wait. So I'm going to put in 1000 here to start off with. So when the browser is reading our script, it'll get to this part and it'll see, okay, I've got to do a set timeout. What function am I going to do? Count up. Okay, how long should I wait? 1000 increments of time. We're not sure yet what those increments are, but 1000 of them. So, and this of course is going to be called automatically, not when we press the button, because we're just trying it out. So let's go do that. Let's try this. So we'll hit refresh, and there, it counted up. And it took about 1 second for countup to be called, and that's because JavaScript counts by milliseconds. And so 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. Of course, we still have a problem, which is the browser only calls countup once, and we need it to keep calling countup. Basically, we needed to do something like this. 1, 2, 3. Unfortunately, we'd have to copy and paste this infinitely to get it to work like we want it to. So, what's another way we could use setTimeout so that we can keep the browser calling countup every second? The solution is actually very simple. All we need to do is take this setTimeout line of code here and drop it right inside of the countup function. Now, when the user clicks on the start button, it's going to call the countup function, which is going to add 1 to the time, output that updated time, and then it's going to do this setTimeout, where the browser is going to wait for 1 second and then call countup again. And the process will start all over again, and on and on and on. Let's give it a try. There it goes. But counting up by seconds is kind of boring. Why don't we count up by tenths of a second instead? So what we'll do is we'll just divide this number by 10. So 1000 milliseconds divided by 10 is 100 milliseconds, which is a tenth of a second. Let's try that. That's more interesting. Our stopwatch still actually isn't a stopwatch yet, though, because it doesn't stop. So let's add a stop button. So we'll go back up in our HTML and we'll add our stop button. And the stop button we'll call the stop function. Let's go down and define that function now. Var stop equals function, parentheses, curly brackets, and above our stop function, I'm going to create a new variable called keep counting. And we're going to set this variable equal to true. Notice we're not putting any quotation marks on true here. So this is not a string variable. This is a new kind of variable that we haven't dealt with yet called a Boolean variable. And there are basically only two Boolean variables that we're ever going to deal with, true and false. Here's what we're going to do with the keep counting variable. When someone clicks the stop button, the stop function is going to set the keep counting variable equal to false. This alone is not going to stop our stopwatch, as you can see. There's one more thing we have to add, but not to the stop function. We actually have to add it to the countup function. What we need to add to the countup function is a conditional statement. And that conditional statement needs to check keep counting and see if it's equal to true. And if it's equal to true, it's going to do all of this stuff. So I'm going to cut this out and paste it inside of our conditional statement. Start. Stop. Great. It stopped. Let's try to start it again. Uh-oh. We still have a problem. The reason why our stopwatch won't start again is because keep counting is still equal to false. We never set it back to true. To fix this problem, all we have to do is add an else statement here. So when keep counting is not equal to true anymore, we just set it back equal to true again. And we do nothing else. We don't do a set timeout or anything. We just set keep counting back equal to true. And we should be able to start up our stopwatch again. Let's give this a try. Start. Stop. Start. Stop. Okay, it seems to be working pretty well now. But there is actually still a problem. Watch what happens when I click start a whole bunch of times. As you can see, the more I click start, the faster our stopwatch gets. Not only that, but if I try to stop our stopwatch now, watch this. I can't stop it. The reason for this problem is that we're calling multiple countups within a single second, and each of those is calling their own set timeout. To prevent this, we need to disable the start button after it's been clicked. To do that, we first have to give our start button an ID. So here's our start button. We'll give it the ID start button. And now, inside of our countup function, we can simply write document.getElementById start button, and then we do dot disabled equals true. And what this line of code will do is it'll grab that start button and disable it. Let's give this a try. So now, when I click the start button, it becomes disabled, so we can't call the countup function multiple times. Unfortunately, even if I click the stop button, the start button remains disabled. So we should go back and make sure to enable it after the stop button gets pressed. That's pretty easy to do. all we have to do is grab this line of code that we use to disable our start button, and then after someone clicks stop and keep counting is set to false, it's going to go back through the countup function and it'll take us to this point right here. And that's the point where we can re-enable the start button. So all we do is the same line of code except true becomes false. Let's give this a try. Start, stop, and start is enabled again. Start again, stop. Okay. There is still a bit of a problem though. It's not something that the user is going to notice, but it is something that we, as programmers, should be careful of. The issue is right here, this line of code. Remember, this is the line of code that disables the start button. Do we really need to run this line of code every time countup is called? The answer is, of course not. We only need to run this line of code once, right after the start button is pressed. So let's move this line of code to a separate function. The function will be called start. And in this function, we're going to do two things. We're going to disable the start button, and then we're going to call the countup function. And now, when someone clicks the start button, we're not going to have it directly do the countup function. Instead, we're going to have it call the start function. So they hit the start button, it'll call start, then the start button will be disabled, and countup will be called, and the countup cycle will begin. So our stopwatch doesn't work any differently now, but we just saved some processing power by changing our code like we did. So now we can start our stopwatch, stop it, start it again, and we can reset it. Before moving on, there are two important differences we should note between our stopwatch and a regular stopwatch. The first is that our stopwatch simply counts in tenths of a second, and it doesn't convert the time into minutes and hours, etc. That's something that we could easily fix. The second difference is a little more problematic, and that is our stopwatch will always be a little bit slower than a regular stopwatch. This is because of the way we're using timeouts. Basically, we have the browser wait 1/10 of a second before calling the countup function. But we have to remember that it takes the browser time to process all these lines of code inside of the countup function. And so it's got to do that before it can even get to this point where it waits 1/10 of a second to do it all over again. And so it will actually never be as fast as a real stopwatch counting tenths of a second. How much slower will it be, you ask? Well, that depends on the speed of your computer and your browser. However, set timeouts are good enough for doing what we really want to do today, which is create some simple animation. So let's get started with that. First, we'll go up in our HTML and we'll add another horizontal rule and a new heading, and we'll write animation. Next, we'll add an image, and we're going to start with a new and improved version of the hero image we used last time. So I'm just going to paste that into our site folder. And let's add the HTML for that image. And the source is hero.png. Let's also give it an ID, call it hero. So this is what we have so far. In the previous tutorial, we made the hero disappear from one place and reappear in another place. This time, let's try to make the hero move smoothly across the screen. Just like last time, before we can move our image, we need to first give it an absolute position. So let's go down into our CSS and we'll add the hero ID and we'll set the position to absolute. Next, we could create a button to make our hero move, but why not just have the player click on the hero? To do that, we simply go up into our hero image and add onClick equals our function, which will be move hero. And now let's get started defining that function. Var move hero equals function, and above that we're going to create another variable. It's going to be called left. I'm going to set that equal to 0. And this is going to be the hero's left position on the screen. More specifically, this left variable here is going to give us the distance between the left side of the screen and the left side of our hero image. So the more this increases, the bigger the distance between the left side of the screen and the hero image. If we want to move our hero image just a little bit, that's pretty easy to do. We simply increase our left variable like this, left equals left plus 20, for example. And then we update the left position of our hero image to the new left value, like this. Document.getElementById hero.style.left equals left plus, in quotations, px for pixels. Don't forget that part or it won't work. Let's try out what we have so far. So when I click on our hero, he moves just a little bit. Now, what do we need to use if we want our hero to continue moving? That's right, a set timeout. So set timeout, and the function we're going to be calling is move hero again. So we put in move hero, no parentheses, and let's have the browser wait 1/10 of a second, so 100 milliseconds, before calling move hero again. Let's give this a try. There he goes. So our hero is now smoothly moving across the screen, but his movement is really weird looking. I mean, he's sliding across the screen like he's skateboarding or something. So how do we make him walk like a normal human being? Well, for that, we need some more images. So here we have some images of our hero walking, some snapshots of him walking. And so I'm going to copy these images and drop them into our site folder. As you can see, each of these images has the same title, Hero Walking, except the number at the end is different, and it goes from 1 to 8. So what we need to do is we need to switch the source for our hero image from hero.png to each of these successively. So first, here's how we change the source of our hero image. We'll just copy this document.getElementById hero part, and we'll paste it down here, and we'll add .src for source, and we set that equal to the source of the new image file we want to use. And for example, if we wanted to change it to hero walking 1, we'd do this, hero walking 1.png. But of course, we don't just want to keep using hero walking 1 every single time we loop through the move hero function. We want it to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, etc., etc. So what we need to do here is put a variable in here. We're going to call the variable stepNum for step number. And let's go define that variable outside of our function. Our stepNum equals 1.
So the first time we loop through the move hero function, it's going to change the hero source to hero walking 1.png. Then we're going to add 1 to step num like this, so that the next time we loop through move hero, we'll get hero walking 2, and then we'll get hero walking 3, etc., etc. Let's see what this looks like. So he's walking, but as you can see, he disappears. And if we look at our console, we can see there's an error. And what kind of error is it? Well, it's looking for, let's see, hero walking 174. Obviously, we don't have that many walking images. We only have 8. So once we get to step num 8, we need to loop back around and make it 1 again. So how do we do that? Well, all we need is a conditional statement. If step num greater than 8, step num equals 1. Let's try this out. Okay. He's walking properly now. There he goes. Before moving on, let's clean our code up a little bit in our moveHero function. Take a look at this. We have document.getElementById hero twice inside of this function. Instead of doing this, we should create a variable outside the function. We'll call it hero, and we set that equal to document.getElementById hero. Once we do this, all we have to do down here is simply type hero. And now our code is easier to read, and we're also saving some processing power. Okay, now that we have our hero walking properly, how about adding the sound of his footsteps? For that, I found a great sound effect from freesound.org called Boots and Spurs Step by jhouse4. And so we're going to use that for the footstep sound of our hero. I'm just going to take that sound file and paste it into our site folder. And here's what it sounds like. So we're going to play this step sound over and over as the hero walks. We first have to create the sound variable, and for that we're going to need the name of the file, of course. So copy that, and we'll create a variable. We'll call it step sound, and we'll set it equal to new audio parentheses, and in those parentheses we'll use quotations, and we'll put the name of the audio file. And let's first try playing the step sound every time step number is set equal to 1. So we'll put another conditional statement right below this one saying if step num equals 1, step sound dot play parentheses. So we'll try this first. Okay, not bad, but I think we need to play the sound one more time during the walking cycle from 1 to 8. So let's add to this conditional statement. Let's add the OR operator, which looks like this. It's 2 vertical lines. And then we'll type step num equals 5. What does this mean? It means if step num is equal to 1 or step num is equal to 5, play the step sound. Let's try this. This sounds better, but there's something kind of off about the rhythm. Just then, it sort of skipped a step. It was supposed to make the step sound, but it seems to have skipped it. So, what's going on here? To gain some insight into this problem, let's take another look at our sound effect audio file in our media player. We're assuming that when we do this part, stepsound.play, we're assuming that it's always starting here at time 0. So it's going to make this sound, right? But what if, instead of starting here every time, sometimes it's starting somewhere else? Like maybe here, for example. What kind of sound is it going to make then? It'll sound something like that. Or perhaps it'll start over here, and then it'll make no sound at all. But we assume it should be starting here at the beginning. To find out where the current time of the sound is before we play it, we can simply console log the current time of step sound before it plays. Like this. console.log step sound dot current time. And let's make sure to capitalize the T on time here. And this will tell us where this step sound is right before it plays. It should be telling us 0. Okay, let's go find out the current time of step sound right before it plays. We'll open up our console log, and here we go. Okay, so the first time our sound plays, it starts at time 0. But after that, it's starting at different times. And you may have noticed that when it was at this time here, we didn't hear any sound at all. What's happening is our step sound hasn't completed playing by the time it gets played again. And when that happens, the current time does not get set back to 0. It just stays wherever it is currently as it's played. If we want it to start back at 0 again every time, even though it's not finished playing from the previous time, what we need to do is actually set the current time equal to 0, which is pretty easy. We just take step.currentTime and set it equal to 0. And now our timing problem is fixed. I think the volume is a little too loud though. So how do we adjust that? Well, that's also pretty simple. After we create our step sound variable, we just go one line below that and say stepsound.volume equals some number between 0 and 1. 1 means full volume and 0 means muted. So let's try 0.5. That's a little better. Next, how about adding an environment for our hero to walk around in? And for that, I've created an image called passage1, and that's what we'll use. We'll just drop it into our site folder here. And let's go up and create that image element. I'll just put it right below our hero image. The source is passage1.png. And we'll make the ID equal to passage. And let's give passage an absolute position as well, so that we can have full control over its position. Let's see how this looks so far. Uh-oh, where did our hero go? Maybe we can find out by doing this. We'll set the top position of our passage to 900 pixels. There's our hero. So how do we get our hero image in front of our passage image? Well, there are a couple ways to do this, but the easiest one is to just make sure that in our HTML, the passage image comes before the hero image. So if I just cut the passage image out and paste it before the hero image, that will put the hero image in front of the passage. So the lower you go down in the HTML, the further out elements come toward you. So let's try this. There he is. Now let's change the positionings of our hero and passage so that it looks like our hero is standing here on the floor of the passage.
Alright, our scene with our hero in this passage is really starting to take shape now, but of course we still have a problem, and that is this. So our hero just walks right through the door. So how can we get the hero to stop when he gets to the door? The solution, again, involves conditional statements. So let's go back to our moveHero function and recall that left is getting bigger and bigger, which means the distance between the hero and the left side of the screen here is getting bigger and bigger. How big does it have to get for the hero to be right up against this door? I think it's probably around 100 pixels or so. So what we can do is we can put an if statement in here saying if left is greater than or equal to 100, return. What this return does is it essentially stops this function from continuing. So once this return is called, the browser stops reading the rest of the code and it just quits this function. So we never get down to this set timeout, which means that the hero is going to stop moving. So let's try this out. And he's stopped. Let's have him move a little bit closer. How about 110 pixels? That's better. Oh, and why don't we get rid of this console log? We don't need that anymore. There we go. So our hero stops, but he stops right in the middle of his step. So why don't we return him to his original stance by changing the source back to hero.png? And that's pretty easy to do. We just type hero.source equals hero.png right here before our return statement. And there he is. Next, it might be good to let people know that they can click on the hero to make him move. To do that, why don't we create a message box that will be integrated into this scene with our hero? So first, we'll go up into our HTML and we'll add a div. We'll give that div an ID, message box. And in the message box, we'll type click on the hero to make him move. And so far, it looks like this. So the reason why it's not showing up yet is because we have to give it an absolute position. It's actually there, it's just stuck behind the passage image. So let's go down and add message box to our CSS. And we'll make its position absolute. There it is. Just to make it easier to see, we'll give it a temporary background color of red. Now let's style it to really make it look like a proper message box. So we'll give it some padding, about 25 pixels on each side. And we'll kind of position it in the center of the passage image. So give it a left position of 200 pixels. And let's also fix the width. We'll make it 500 pixels wide. And let's give it a top position too. About 725 pixels. Let's try that. Looks good. Maybe I'll put these position attributes together here, just to keep it logical. Next, how about changing the font color to white? And we'll get rid of that ugly red background color as well. And instead, we'll use the RGBA system to do a dark blue color. So 0 for red, 0 for green, and 110 for the blue value. And we'll give it an alpha of, how about 0.8? So we're going to make it semi-transparent, just a little bit. Well, that looks pretty nice, but it's now getting a little bit difficult to distinguish the message box from some of the darker parts of the passage image. So let's give our message box a border. And here's how we do that. We type border and how wide we want the border to be, and let's go for 2 pixels. And what type of border we want, and we want a solid border. There are some other types you can choose. And then we choose the color, and let's just go with white for now. And that's what that looks like. And this is starting to look pretty good, but I'd like to actually make these corners round instead of square. So here's what we do. We type border radius, and what we want the radius of the curve for each of the corners to be. And let's try 15 pixels for each of the radii. That looks pretty good. Now, once someone clicks on the hero and makes him move, we want this message to disappear. So to do that, let's go down to our moveHero function and let's create a new variable, and we'll call it messageBox. And we'll set it equal to document.getElementById messageBox. To hide this message box when someone moves the hero, we could do something like this. Inside of moveHero, we simply add messagebox.style.display equals none. But this is not a good idea. The reason why is because, of course, we call moveHero many times. And we only need to hide the message box once, and then it's hidden. So this is a very similar issue to what happened with the stopwatch when we were trying to figure out how to disable this start button in an efficient way. So just like in that case, the best way to deal with making this message box disappear is to create a new function. And so we'll create a function called startMoving. And inside of that function, we'll have 2 lines of code. One line of code is going to be this one, which hides the message box. And the other line of code is going to be moveHero. And we can't forget this. We need to change the function that gets called when someone clicks on the hero from moveHero to startMoving. So now when someone clicks on our hero, it's going to call the startMoving function. And the startMoving function is going to hide the message box just once. And then it's going to call moveHero. And once moveHero is called, it's going to use setTimeout to animate our hero until he gets to the door, and that's where it's going to stop the function. So this is what we have now. When the hero gets to the door, though, we should probably tell people what's going on with that door. Can we just open it up, or is it locked? Do we need a key? What's going on? So we're going to have to bring our message box back. But
put a different message in it. So here's how we do that. When the hero gets to the door, which is this area right here, we're going to change the inner HTML of our message box to our new message. I'll use double quotations here. And our new message will be, the door is locked, but it's old and rotten. You might be able to break it with your sword. Let me change the view to make this message easier to see. We'll turn word wrap on. There we go. Now you can see the whole message pretty easily. So we've changed our message box inner HTML, but we have to remember that our message box is still hidden. So we have to display it once again. And to do that, we simply do messagebox.style.display equals empty quotations. Let's see if this works. Okay. So, today we learned a lot of useful stuff. We learned how to generate random numbers, round them, and use conditional statements, if else, and else, to create this fortune teller application. Let's try asking it another question. Are your fortunes accurate? Yes! Fantastic. Next, we learned how to use setTimeout, and together with conditional statements, we created this stopwatch. Finally, we combine all of our knowledge to create this animation sequence. Join me for part 2 of this tutorial, where we'll learn how to make the hero swing his sword to break through that door and find out what lies on the other side. Until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.